Imagine, right, stepping into this multi-million-dollar high-performance sports car. You grip the steering wheel, you floor the gas pedal, and you just hear the engine absolutely scream.
Oh yeah, the RPMs are redlining.
Exactly. The exhaust is roaring. I mean, you are burning expensive high-octane fuel by the gallon. But, you look out the window, and you haven't moved a single inch.
You're just sitting there.
You are totally stationary. And today we're looking at why your company, despite all its talent and funding, is sitting in the driveway doing exactly that. Welcome back to the deep dive in the Agile Product Hub. Many organizations have hardworking teams, clear roadmaps, active governance, regular ceremonies, and visible delivery activity. Yet work still waits. Not always because people lack skill, capacity, or motivation, but because the organization lacks decision confidence.
Yeah, and that invisible friction is really one of the most frustrating things you can experience in modern corporate life.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at the surface, right, and everything seems fine. The gears are turning. People are incredibly busy. I mean, calendars are completely full of these alignment meetings.
Back to back to back.
Right. But the machine isn't actually moving forward to deliver value to you.
I think everyone listening can, picture that exact scenario right now. And to unpack this, we are looking at this concept of decision latency, which comes to us from the work of author Matthew Coxall.
And we'll just call him Matt from here on out, just to keep things conversational.
Yeah, exactly. So we're using a huge stack of his work today to really get to the bottom of this. We've got the Harmony operating model, Product Agile Harmony, and a fresh perspective on the future of Agile roles.
And, we really need to treat those sources not as separate textbooks or whatever, but as interconnected lenses.
Right.
They help us view the organization as an entire ecosystem. So you can see why the way we design our systems either creates the confidence to act or just actively destroys it.
Well, before we get into the weeds of decision latency, I really need to set the table with how we are defining that first source, because this is crucial. THOM, the Harmony operating model, pronounced THOM, is a new and exciting way to bring operating models together. It is not another framework to roll out, but an operating lens for seeing how strategy, leadership, product flow, technology, data, funding, structure, measurement, and everyday decisions interact.
That is such an important distinction. Treating it as a lens rather than a framework is vital.
Because if you just roll it out...
Right. If leadership treats THOM like a checklist to implement, like, okay, we bought the model, let's install the new meeting cadences.
Yeah, let's do the THOM meetings now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If they do that, they've already lost the plot. Our mission today is to look through that lens. We're going to dissect what decision latency really is, how it silently kills product flow, and why standard governance usually makes it worse.
And how different roles within an Agile system experience this hidden friction, right? So let's start with that friction. Because I know you, listening right now, are probably sitting in an organization that looks perfectly functional on paper.
I mean, you have the right job titles.
You use the right software, you have these beautifully formatted roadmaps, the dashboards in the executive suite are all glowing green.
Always green.
Right. But down in the engine room, getting anything out the door feels like dragging a boulder up a hill. Let's talk about why that massive disconnect exists.
Well, it fundamentally comes down to a failure of system reinforcement rather than a failure of human intent.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, organizations invest heavily, right? They deliver work, they buy new capability, they introduce shiny new tools, but the progress always feels fragile. Momentum is incredibly hard to sustain.
Like every sprint is a grind.
Yeah, and the reason for that fragility is that modern organizations are operating in deep, unprecedented complexity.
So let me synthesize that a bit. When we face complexity, human psychology kicks in. We just despise uncertainty.
We hate it.
We want to know exactly what's going to happen, how much it will cost, and when it will be done.
Precisely. So to cope with the anxiety of that complexity, organizations introduce certainty mechanisms.
Like what?
They build alignment forums, coordination layers, massive planning cycles. And the crazy thing is, individually, every single one of those mechanisms is completely rational.
Right. I mean, you want to reduce the risk of a data breach, so you add a security approval step.
Exactly. Or you want to make sure budgets aren't blown, so you add a financial sign-off. It all makes logical sense in a vacuum.
Sure, nobody wants a catastrophic failure. Like, I wouldn't want some rogue developer accidentally wiping the production database because we removed all the guardrails,
Of course not. But collectively, when you stack those rational decisions on top of each other, year after year, they create systemic contradictions.
Give me an example of a contradiction.
Okay, a classic one is when a CEO stands up at a quarterly town hall and demands team autonomy, rapid innovation, and a fail-fast mentality.
We've all been in that town hall.
Right. But then the actual escalation paths, the funding models, and the performance reviews in that very same company aggressively reward caution and predictability.
Oh, wow. So the system is basically telling you to run, but the floor is covered in glue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nothing is technically broken. I mean, the software works, the HR department is functioning, but nothing is moving fast. The organization is suffering from a crippling lack of decision confidence.
Which brings us right back to that Ferrari analogy. The illusion of alignment is the engine roaring. The dashboards look great, but if decision-making is the transmission linking the engine to the wheels, decision latency is the transmission being completely blown out.
It's just slipping.
Right. So let's define the core concept of decision latency, because I think it's easy to misunderstand.
It really is. People think it's simply slow decision-making.
Yeah, they assume latency just means like executives taking 3 weeks to reply to an email.
But that's just an operational delay. Decision latency is much deeper than that. It is the specific delay between a decision needing to be made and the organization feeling safe, clear, and confident enough to actually pull the trigger and make it.
The word safe really stands out there.
Oh, it's the most important word in the definition. Because forcing fast decisions without creating safety is actually worse than moving slowly.
Wait, really? Worse?
Absolutely. Think about it. If a frustrated executive just pounds the table and yells, "We need more velocity, make decisions faster," they are demanding speed without confidence.
And what happens when a team is forced into speed without confidence?
They fake it.
Wow.
They comply. They commit to things without any evidence. And that creates massive rework down the line. It erodes trust between teams, and it leads to an environment where people are just trying to survive this sprint rather than, build a good product.
I want to break down the mechanics of this, though. Where do these decisions actually stall out? Like, if the transmission is slipping, where is the physical wear and tear happening in the corporate machine?
They stall out in the invisible spaces between people.
What do you mean?
Hidden or shifting boundaries, unclear ownership, and the immense pressure to provide certainty way too early in the product lifecycle. Think about fuzzy accountability.
I hate fuzzy accountability.
Right. If 3 different departments all feel partially responsible for a new feature, that means no one feels safe making a final call.
Because if it goes wrong, who takes the hit?
Exactly. When ownership is blurred, multiple people have the authority to say no or let's wait and see, but no one is truly empowered or courageous enough to say yes.
And I want to explore the fallout of that speed without safety concept you brought up. Let's say leadership pushes hard. They say, stop stalling, just deliver the feature.
Well, the organization usually ends up pushing risk to the exact wrong places.
Like onto the dev team.
Yeah, they force a development team to commit to a delivery date before discovery is even finished. The team, feeling unsafe but heavily pressured, just says yes. They commit without evidence to get leadership off their backs.
Which inevitably leads to catastrophic late-stage failures. Like, the product ships on time, but it's the completely wrong product.
Or it fundamentally breaks under user load because the decision to proceed wasn't based on technical confidence. It was based on hierarchical compliance.
Man, that is so common. And this brings us to a really uncomfortable truth about corporate culture. When things go wrong like that, or when things are chronically slow, our natural human instinct is to blame the individuals involved. We hear it in the cafeteria all the time. We just need braver managers, or our developers are too indecisive, or the product owners just don't have enough grit.
And Matt's work firmly rejects that premise entirely. Decision latency is an environmental issue. It is not a personality flaw.
So it's not about hiring better people.
No, because people in corporations are generally very smart. They adapt to the constraints and the signals around them. They act entirely rationally within their local context.
Okay, I want to dig into that term, system signals. We talk about culture a lot, but a system signal feels more mechanical. Walk me through a deep, real-world case study of a system signal conditioning a workforce.
Okay, let's look at a common scenario. A mid-level development team makes a local decision. They use their best judgment on a UI change, but the outcome isn't great. A major client complains.
Okay, standard stuff so far.
Right. Now watch the leadership response. If the immediate reaction from the VP is to add a new approval gate, say, a mandate that all future UI changes must be reviewed by an executive steering committee, the system has just broadcast a massive, flashing neon signal to the entire company.
The signal being, Local judgment is dangerous. Do not think for yourself.
You've got it. It just taught everyone in the building that making a call is a career risk.
Wow.
If the system punishes learning, if it punishes honest, well-intentioned mistakes, or if it actively rewards the appearance of control over actual value delivery, then delaying a decision or kicking it upstairs is a highly rational act of self-preservation.
You know, I use this analogy a lot. It's learned helplessness. You can't put a dog in a cage that shocks them every time they touch the gate, and then a year later open the gate and blame the dog for lacking the bravery to go for a walk.
That's exactly it. It's unfair, and it's structurally blind. You can't ask people to be brave innovators when the environment actively hunts bravery.
So if the environment breeds this hesitation, let's look at how this invisible fear physically manifests in the actual workflow. How does decision latency slow product flow?
Well, to map that out, we look at the THOM product loop.
Okay, break down the loop.
The loop is a continuous cycle of 4 stages. You have intent, which leads into discovery and learning, which flows into delivery, which generates feedback.
And then that feedback informs the next intent.
Exactly. It's a healthy loop. But decision latency straightens that loop out.
Straightens it out.
Yeah, it breaks the loop and turns it into a pipeline. Work continues to move from left to right on the Jira board, but the actual value does not.
Oh, that's interesting.
Organizations suffering from decision latency optimize their pipelines for predictability. They just want to push work through stages. A healthy loop, however, optimizes for learning. Decision latency separates discovery from commitment.
That feels like a subtle point, but I think it's massive. You're saying they decide what to build, commit to a deadline, and then do the discovery.
Exactly. Teams are forced to validate what has already been decided by executives, rather than using the discovery phase to actually shape the decision of what to build in the first place.
This triggers a very specific memory for me, and I know you listening will relate to this. Here is a mandatory example of how this plays out.
Let's hear it.
So, a leadership team agrees on a strategic priority for the quarter and publishes this beautiful roadmap. Everyone appears aligned. It looks fantastic on a slide deck.
Oh, I've seen those slide decks.
But then a real trade-off appears. The team starts the work and they hit a wall. They are suddenly unsure whether speed to market, code quality, user learning, cost reduction, security risk, or technical sustainability matters most.
And let me guess. The trade-off was never made explicit in that beautiful roadmap.
Exactly. It was completely ignored. So the decision halts, it moves upward, governance gets involved, and the team just sits there waiting for confidence.
That is the quintessential example of the illusion of clarity. The roadmap looked like a rock-solid consensus. But it wasn't. It was just a list of desires without constraints.
A wish list.
Yeah. The illusion shatters the absolute moment a real-world physical constraint appears. And because the system hasn't made it safe for the team to make that trade-off locally, because they don't know if the CEO cares more about speed or quality today, what is their immediate reflex?
They throw their hands up and escalate. They send it right up the chain of command.
Escalation. This brings us to a critical paradigm-shifting concept in THOM. Escalation is a structural signal.
Okay, what does that mean?
It is a design smell, not a behavioral flaw. When a system lacks decision confidence, escalation becomes the organization's primary source of courage.
Let me stop you there because I want to challenge this.
Go for it.
I've managed teams, and honestly, sometimes escalation is a vital safety net. I don't want a junior team making a multi-million-dollar call on infrastructure without escalating it. If they hit a wall they can't climb, they should ask for help. Isn't portraying escalation as a design smell a bit, I don't know, utopian?
It's a completely fair challenge, and THOM differentiates between the two types. We have to separate necessary escalation from compensatory escalation.
Okay, what's necessary escalation?
The necessary escalation happens when a team genuinely crosses a boundary. If a decision impacts a completely different product line, or if it requires funding that exceeds their local budget, escalating is healthy and required.
Okay, so what is compensatory escalation then?
Compensatory escalation happens when a team is trying to escape an unsafe environment. They escalate to distribute risk or to resolve ambiguity that leadership failed to clarify in the first place.
Ah, I see.
They are seeking approval not for strategic guidance, but for political cover.
If the director signs off on this architectural shortcut, I can't get fired if the servers crash.
Exactly. And when compensatory escalation replaces good system design, leaders end up stepping in to resolve cross-team conflicts continuously. Sprint after sprint, the VP is in the weeds, breaking ties, instead of fixing the broken boundaries that caused the conflict to begin with.
I see this happen so often when there's a crisis. A deadline is missed, or a competitor launches something huge, and urgency spikes.
Oh, urgency acts like a magnet for decision-making authority. It centralizes decisions instantly. The immediate reflex is to pull all authority up to the top level.
Everyone looks to the CEO.
Right. And honestly, in a true crisis, centralization can stabilize the ship. It's often necessary. The toxicity sets in if the organization fails to push that authority back down to the teams once the crisis passes.
The temporary centralization hardens into the permanent new normal.
Exactly.
So these decisions get escalated. They fly up the org chart.
Right.
And where they usually land, right in the lap of governance. Which begs the question, does standard corporate governance actually solve this confidence problem, or does it just put a heavy blanket over it?
Well, in theory, governance exists to align decisions, ensure strategic fit, and manage enterprise risk.
In theory.
In theory. But in practice, especially in high-latency environments, governance centralizes control by default. Reassurance becomes weight.
Reassurance becomes weight. Explain the mechanics of that. How does the desire for reassurance physically slow down the software?
Think about the psychology of the leaders sitting in those governance forums. They feel uncertain. They are disconnected from the actual code or the actual customers.
They're looking at spreadsheets.
Yeah. So to reduce their own perceived risk, they add a layer of approval. They require a standardized slide deck. Then they add another layer, maybe an architectural review board.
And a budget committee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when a single decision must pass through multiple forums, accountability completely diffuses.
So decisions slow down to a crawl, but not because of rigorous, brilliant scrutiny.
No, they slow down because responsibility is fragmented across 50 different people.
This brings to mind a scenario that is physically painful for me to remember, and it's another one of those mandatory examples we need to hit. A governance forum that discusses decisions endlessly, but defers ownership.
Of the classic steering committee.
Yes. Picture the scene. Everyone is sitting around a massive mahogany table or on a giant 40-person Teams call. Everyone nods. Everyone reviews the data, asks smart-sounding, probing questions to justify their presence.
Can we see this segmented by region?
Exactly. They request slightly tweaked charts for next week's meeting, but at the end of the hour, no one's name goes on the dotted line. The decision is deferred. A decision made by a committee is owned by a ghost.
Wow. Owned by a ghost. That captures it perfectly. Shared approval creates blurred responsibility. If 10 people technically approve a deployment, no single person feels the visceral weight of the outcome.
And because no one feels the weight, no one is in a rush to finalize it.
Precisely.
So what does this heavy ghost-owned system actually do to the individuals trying to do the work? Let's look at this through the lens of the specific Agile roles, starting with the product owner. How does decision latency hit them on a Tuesday morning?
For a product owner, decision latency usually manifests as a deep structural paradox.
A paradox.
Yeah, they feel ultimate accountability without any actual decision space. They are the ones expected to manage the priorities, align the angry stakeholders, and deliver measurable value to the market. But the key trade-offs, the actual levers they need to pull to make that happen, sit somewhere else.
If they don't have those levers, they aren't really a product owner. They become a glorified project manager or like a backlog administrator.
Worse, they become a mere translator or a permission seeker. If a PO has to spend 3 weeks asking a steering committee for permission to swap 2 items on a backlog based on live user feedback, they don't own the product. The steering committee owns the product.
The PO is just administering the paperwork.
Exactly.
I've always thought of it like a head chef who is held accountable for maintaining the 3 Michelin stars of a restaurant.
Oh, I like this.
Right, but they aren't allowed to choose their own ingredients, they can't change the seasonal menu, and they have to text the restaurant's financial backer every time they want to add an extra pinch of salt to the soup.
And imagine the psychological toll of that. This is our next mandatory example. A product owner accountable for value, but lacking decision space. They're taking all the heat in the sprint reviews for poor outcomes or delayed releases, but they aren't legally allowed within the system to make the hard trade-offs required to fix those outcomes.
It leads to massive burnout.
Completely.
Okay, so if the PO is the chef without a menu who is watching the kitchen slowly grind to a halt, let's talk about the Scrum Master.
Ah, the Scrum Master.
Right.
In a healthy system, they are the heartbeat. In a high-latency system, they often get reduced to event facilitators.
Right, they become the person who just books the calendar invites and asks, what did you do yesterday in the daily stand-up?
Exactly. But Matt's work emphasizes that a mature Scrum Master is not a secretary. They are a system sensor. Because they operate across the team and the stakeholders, they see recurring impediments and flow disruption before anyone else.
How does decision latency specifically look to a system sensor?
They experience it as repeated blockers that never truly resolve.
Like what?
Well, a ticket gets blocked because of database access issue. They escalate it, it gets fixed temporarily, and 2 sprints later, the exact same boundary issue blocks another ticket. They see the recurring stakeholder conflicts. But most importantly, they notice the drift.
What do you mean by drift?
Drift is when a team begins to naturally compensate for a broken system through unofficial channels. Extra undocumented meetings, side-channel Slack messages to get favors from other departments, and weekend heroics just to bypass the slow governance.
Let me push back here. Isn't a Scrum Master's primary job to clear the immediate brush? If a developer is blocked, the SM goes and gets them unblocked by any means necessary. If that means calling in a favor, isn't that just good hustle?
Good hustle in the short term, disastrous in the long term.
Why?
Because if the Scrum Master just plays the hero and uses side channels, they are masking the system's incompetence. The modern Scrum Master must highlight these structural frictions to leadership. They need to step back and ask the engineering director, why does this team have to escalate this specific type of technical decision every single sprint?
They need to point out the pattern of the delay, not just fix the symptom.
Exactly.
It's a huge trap. It's so easy for SMs to just become the team's administrative assistant, putting out small fires every day, but never asking why the forest is filled with gasoline.
That's a great way to put it.
Meanwhile, what is the experience of the people actually building the product? Let's look at the development team, the software engineers, QA testers.
For the development team, latency is experienced as waiting, rework, and delayed discovery. In high-latency organizations, developers are often treated as mere delivery recipients.
Just hand them the Jira tickets, tell them to put their headphones on, and let them code.
Right. But developers must be intimately involved in shaping feasible options. When the why behind a feature is hidden, or when the core trade-off or underlying constraint is unclear, the team naturally hesitates.
Obviously.
If they are handed prepackaged, fully designed solutions instead of actual customer problems to solve, they completely lose the ability to adapt when they hit a technical snag.
Let's use another mandatory example from the source material. Picture a team with incredibly high delivery skill, but not enough confidence to decide locally.
Happens all the time.
They know how to code the feature. The technical skill is absolutely there. They could build it in an afternoon, but they don't know if they're allowed to choose the technical approach, like using a new open source library without an enterprise architect's explicit blessing.
And so what do?
Instead of building it, they sit and wait for 3 weeks.
And this is where the concept of product agile harmony becomes critical. The framework relies on balancing 4 interconnected elements: value, feasibility, usability, and viability.
Okay, let's go into that.
Engineering absolutely owns feasibility, but if they aren't part of the harmonic conversations early on, if they aren't in the room when the business is debating value and viability, they will be forced to build unfeasible solutions.
Break this down for me. What is the difference between usability and viability in this context? Because I think a lot of people mash those together.
It's a vital distinction. Usability, which is often championed by design or UX, asks, can the customer figure out how to use this? Is it intuitive?
Right. Does the button make sense?
Yes. Viability, which is championed by the business or product side, asks, does this work for our business model? Is it legal? Can we sell it profitably?
And feasibility is engineering asking, can we actually build this with our current tech stack without the servers melting?
Exactly. If the developers, the masters of feasibility, aren't involved in the harmonic conversation with viability and value, leadership will promise the market a feature that is literally impossible to build within the given constraints.
The developers will try to build it, fail, and get blamed even though the decision was doomed from the start.
It's a setup.
You mentioned architects earlier, and that brings us to the role of the specialists: security, architecture, compliance, legal, data privacy. How do these folks fit into a low latency system without slowing it down?
The specialists, often referred to behind closed doors as the Department of No.
The sales prevention team.
Right. But specialists can either drastically reduce or drastically increase decision latency based entirely on how they are structurally positioned in the flow of work.
So it's about timing.
Yes. To reduce latency, they must act as embedded enablers, not late approval gates.
This brings us to a classic nightmare scenario, another mandatory example we must cover. A specialist review happening too late and becoming an approval gate.
Oh, we've all lived this.
A development team builds a massive complex feature for 3 months. They are so proud of it. They've done the testing. They are ready to deploy on Friday. And on Thursday afternoon, InfoSec swoops in, does an audit, flags a core architectural vulnerability regarding how user data is stored, and hard blocks the release.
And the entire development team is furious at InfoSec.
Livid.
But here is the perspective shift. The specialist isn't trying to be difficult. They are doing their job, which is protecting the company. The problem is that the system engaged them at the exact wrong point in the product loop.
It's like building a house and only asking the building inspector to look at the foundation after the roof is on.
Exactly. Traditional models position specialists as gatekeepers. They either demand a massive, comprehensive blueprint up front, or they do a punishing review at the very end.
So what's the alternative?
In a mature, agile system, specialists must collaborate continuously in backlog refinement and early discovery. They should be providing guardrails and principles saying, here is the encryption standard you must use, go build it, so the team can run fast and safe, rather than checking their homework at the end.
Okay, let's zoom out and connect all these interconnected roles to the bigger picture. If the system is broken, if product owners lack decision space, if Scrum Masters are ignored when they point out drift, if developers are waiting for permission, and if specialists are forced into being late gatekeepers, who actually has the power to fix the fundamental design of the system?
The engineering leaders. We're talking about the directors, the VPs in engineering, the CTOs, the heads of product. Their primary job is no longer to make every technical decision.
So what is their job?
Their job is to design the conditions for decision-making.
It's like they are the urban planners of the organization. They don't drive the cars, they don't deliver the packages, but they build the roads, they set the speed limits, and they design the intersections so traffic flows smoothly without crashing.
That urban planning analogy is spot on. Engineering leaders reduce latency by creating clarity, autonomy, alignment, and technical confidence. Output-focused leadership, just pacing around the office demanding more features faster, completely fails in complex environments.
Yeah, yelling doesn't work.
It doesn't. Leaders must provide what Matt calls structured autonomy.
Let me tell you the skeptic. Structured autonomy sounds like an oxymoron. It sounds like corporate doublespeak for do whatever you want as long as it's exactly what I told you to do. What does it actually look like in practice?
It looks like knowing precisely when to step in and precisely when to delegate. As a leader, you step in for long-term technical direction, enterprise-level strategy, and cross-team risk. You set the boundaries. But you explicitly delegate the implementation details and the local trade-offs to the teams.
Okay, that makes sense.
And crucially, an engineering leader's greatest tool in this environment is often restraint.
Restraint. You mean literally biting their tongue?
Yes. Think about what happens when a team encounters an unclear boundary and escalates a technical decision up to the VP of engineering. The leader's ego and their reflex is to just give the team the answer.
Use the AWS database, not the Azure one. Now get back to work.
Exactly. It feels efficient. Everyone can move on.
But by doing that, the leader just reinforced the compensatory escalation. They proved that the team was right to escalate because the leader had the answer all along.
Precisely. A leader focused on building systemic confidence must resist that urge to provide the answer. Instead, they need to ask, what boundary is unclear in our current architecture guidelines that made you feel you had to escalate this to me? You fix the boundary, you clarify the guideline, and then you hand the decision back to the team.
So looking at all these perspectives together, the PO, the Scrum Master, the devs, the specialists, the leaders, a really clear mandate for the future emerges from Matt's work. The future of Agile roles is not role protection.
Emphatically, no. It is not about siloing into strict certified job descriptions and saying, that's not my job, I'm just the Scrum Master, I don't care about viability.
It's about strengthening each role's contribution to the whole. It's about system contribution. Value doesn't come from isolated tasks. It comes from how these roles behave together under pressure in those harmonic conversations.
Mature Agile roles move from activity-based contribution, like saying, I ran the sprint planning meeting on time, to system contribution, saying, I helped the whole system move smoother by clarifying a strategic trade-off between engineering and marketing.
I find that honestly so liberating. It shifts the whole focus of the organization away from, am I doing Scrum right according to a manual, to, are we creating an environment where confident decisions can happen? It moves you from compliance to capability.
It's a fundamental paradigm shift.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the illness, we've explored the psychology of latency, we've looked at the symptoms across the whole org chart. Now, give me the medicine. What is a practical, concrete tool that you, the listener, can take into work tomorrow to break the gridlock when a decision is stalling out?
This is where we get highly practical. Matt Coxall introduces a brilliant tool called the 7-question decision confidence check. You literally run through these 7 questions out loud when work stalls.
Let's hear the raw list first, and then I want to deep role play to see how they actually work under fire.
Here are the 7 questions. Question 1, what decision is actually needed? Question 2, who has the best context to make it? Question 3, who owns the affected outcome?
Okay, first 3 are solid.
Question 4, what boundary is currently unclear? Question 5, what specific risk is the organization trying to avoid? Question 6, what would make this decision safe enough to try? And question 7, do we genuinely need escalation or just alignment?
Okay, let's put this to the test. Let's do a massive deep role play. I want to build a scenario. Let's say we are working on Project Phoenix. I'm the product owner for the core platform. You're the engineering lead. We are stuck in a tense meeting with Sarah, a major stakeholder from marketing.
Okay, I'm with you.
Here is the conflict. Marketing wants to push a massive interactive new promotional banner to the homepage next week to hit a quarterly target. But doing so will require my engineering team to pause work on a critical payment gateway upgrade that is supposed to launch before the holiday rush.
Oh boy, that's a mess.
Everyone is arguing, tempers are flaring. We are about to say the dreaded corporate phrase, let's take this offline, which we all know just means let's escalate this to the VP and let them deal with it.
Yep.
Instead of letting that happen, I pull out the 7 questions. Walk me through how this changes the room.
Good. You stop the argument, put the framework on the whiteboard, and start with question 1. What decision is actually needed? How do you answer that?
I'd say, we need to decide whether to delay the payment gateway deployment by 2 weeks in order to build and launch marketing's promo banner.
Instantly, you've removed the emotion. It's not about marketing being demanding or engineering being stubborn. It's a specific resource allocation decision. Then you move to question 2. Who has the best context to make it?
Well, the development team knows the technical costs in hours. Sarah from marketing knows the projected revenue value of the promo. But who sees both? As the product owner, I have the context of both the backlog and the business value.
Right. And question 3 is where the tension starts to resolve. Who owns the affected outcome?
This is tricky. If the payment gateway fails during the holiday rush because we delayed the upgrade, that outcome falls squarely on my head and the engineering team's head. If the promo misses its window and Q3 revenue drops, that falls on Sarah in marketing.
And here's the pivot point. Question 4. This is where 90% of corporate arguments get stuck. What boundary is currently unclear? Why are you and Sarah fighting?
Because we don't actually know the executive boundary. The unclear boundary is whether short-term revenue generation, the promo, supersedes platform stability, the gateway, in this specific quarter's strategic goals. The CEO said in a town hall we need both growth and stability. But they never defined which one wins in a tiebreaker.
You've just found the root cause of the argument. You aren't fighting each other. You are both fighting an invisible boundary. So, question 5. What specific risk is the organization trying to avoid?
Marketing is trying to avoid the risk of missing a Wall Street sales target. Engineering is trying to avoid the catastrophic risk of the entire payment system crashing during Black Friday.
Now that the risks are on the table, not hidden behind anger, we go to question 6. What would make this decision safe enough to try? How can we mitigate both risks simultaneously?
Well, what if we compromise on the scope of the promo? What if engineering builds a scaled-down static version of the promo banner? It won't be fully interactive, but it takes us 1 day to implement instead of 2 weeks. That gives marketing 80% of their projected traffic while allowing the core gateway work to continue almost exactly on schedule.
And finally, question 7. Do we genuinely need escalation or just alignment?
We don't need the VP to decide. I don't need to send an angry email to my boss. We just needed to align on a compromise that respects both the short-term revenue boundary and the long-term stability boundary. We align right here in the room, and we move forward.
Notice what just happened. By answering those questions aloud, you completely shifted the psychology of the room. You moved everyone from defensive posturing, protecting their own turf and budget, to collaborative system design. You isolated the friction, revealed the unclear boundary, and generated a safe-to-try option.
I love how that cuts right through the noise. It treats people like rational adults trying to solve a puzzle rather than political enemies trying to win a fight.
Exactly.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, we need to connect all this theory, all these roles, and this framework back to your daily reality as a listener. Because decision latency isn't just an annoying operational delivery delay. It is a vital, flashing check engine light for your entire company. It is a direct signal of how your system handles trust, ownership, risk, and authority.
That's the core takeaway. If your system is slow, it's not because your people are lazy or lack skill. It's because your system is afraid.
Yeah.
The organization lacks decision confidence. So to finish up, I want to offer some role-based reflection questions for you, the listener, to take away. Depending on what chair you sit in tomorrow morning, ask yourself these questions.
Okay, I'm honest.
If you are a product owner, which decisions am I genuinely expected to own, and which do I secretly feel I still need permission for?
Good one.
If you are a Scrum Master, which decision-related impediments keep recurring sprint after sprint, and how can I expose the pattern instead of just fixing the symptom?
Stop playing the hero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are on the development team, where are we waiting right now? Because the why, the business trade-off or the technical constraint, is fundamentally unclear.
What about the specialists?
If you are a specialist, am I enabling better decisions early in discovery, or have I allowed myself to become a late approval point that blocks flow?
The Department of No.
And finally, if you are an engineering leader, where am I actively creating decision confidence, and where am I quietly becoming the decision bottleneck myself?
Those are incredibly sharp questions. I want you to think about that multi-million-dollar Ferrari revving in neutral. The engine is fine. The tires are fine. The fuel is in the tank. But if you want to actually move forward, you have to engage the transmission. You have to make decisions safe.
And I'll leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. The next time intense pressure hits your organization, a missed deadline, a failed deployment, your instinct and your leadership's instinct will be to add a new control mechanism. Another meeting, another sign-off layer, another standardized form. What if, instead of adding a control, you deliberately removed one constraint?
Wow.
What would happen to the harmony of your system if you chose trust over control?
I challenge you to try that this week. See what happens when you remove a roadblock instead of building a new toll booth.
Thanks for listening to the deep dive on the Agile Product Hub. You can find more articles, books, and podcasts at agileproducthub.com. Until next time, keep making work clearer, calmer, and more connected.